Well, our journey through the book of Acts is almost over. We have today and next Sunday, and we'll have made it through the whole book. But we still need to get Paul to Rome, don't we? And there's two options for getting there. He can go the easy way, or he can go the hard way. And chapter 27 gives us the story of which way they choose to get to Rome. I'm going to tell you the story today, so you don't need to open your Bibles, but just listen to this story from chapter 27. Last week we left Paul in the city of Caesarea, and he ends up spending over 2 years there, still as a prisoner, but he meets with the king and he meets with multiple governors and spends time with them telling them about Jesus. And it takes over 2 years before the governor finally sends Paul to Rome. In chapter 27, tracks that ship's journey. In fact, you might want to pause and Google a map of Paul's journey to Rome so you can see where the ship goes. Because their plan is to sail safely along the southern coast of what was then known as Asia. And so they stop in the city of Sidon and they stop in the city of Myra where they change ships. And Paul is on a cargo ship with a bunch of Roman soldiers and prisoners as well. And then they stop in the city of Cnidus. And we're told as they stop in the city of Cnidus that they're making slow progress, right? It's late in the season. The shipping season is winding down. The winds are not cooperating well. But then real trouble first hits when they leave Cnidus. They sail out intending to go straight west. Instead, the wind comes up and blows them straight south. Right? And they're blown out of control, but luckily the island of Crete is down there, and they're able to slide down underneath the island of Crete and find protection from the wind there. Now they have a big decision to make. Because like I said, sailing season is over. It's mid to late October by now. And rule of thumb in those days was that sailing after September 15 was not recommended. It's well after September 15 now. And sailing after November 11 was considered suicidal. And that date was coming up quickly. So they needed to decide whether they're going to sail on and try and race to Rome, hopefully to get there before November 11, or do they stay here, safely tucked away on the island of Crete until the shipping season begins again. That would be a 6 to 7 month wait. So on one hand, it would be costly and inconvenient to wait. On the other hand, it's a huge risk to continue sailing on. Thankfully, God makes it very clear to them what they should do. He leaves no doubt for them. Right, in verse 10, Paul says to the centurion who's in charge and the captain of the ship, he says, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to the ship and cargo and to our own lives also." In other words, Paul says, God has told me to tell you to stay put. Wait here. It's worth the 6 to 7 month wait because it's too dangerous to go on. That's God's grace, warning them not to go. He wants what's best for them, right? Unfortunately, God's direction is not what they choose, because there are a number of other voices that are speaking into this decision, into this conversation, besides God's. Right? You have the centurion who is the voice of power, right? The voice of Roman power that says we can handle anything, right? We're the Romans. Nothing stands in our way. You have the voice of the captain, which is the voice of money and finances. He is very motivated economically to make this delivery and cash in. You have the voice of the majority of the people on the ship, the voice of what's popular, right? They put the decision to a vote. There's 276 people who all get to speak into it and share what they think is best. And all of those other voices say, we should sail on. They think they know better than Paul. They think they know better than God. And we hear that in verses 11 and 12, where it says the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and of the owner of the ship, and the majority decided that we should sail on. So that's what they do. When the wind was right, a gentle breeze blowing, they set sail again. Well, that gentle wind quickly rises to become a hurricane, and that ship is blown helplessly west out into the open ocean. Right? And they are completely helpless. They're at the mercy of this horrible wind and of these huge waves. It gets so bad that after tying ropes under the boat simply to hold the boat together, and after throwing almost all the cargo overboard to keep the ship from sailing, and even after throwing parts of the ship overboard to drag behind the ship to try and slow them down, it says that they finally gave up all hope of surviving. They were doomed. And that's when God comes and speaks to them through Paul again. Right, in verse 21, first God gives them a little bit of a I told you so. Right? He says through Paul, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourself this damage and loss. In other words, you had the choice of the easy way or the hard way, and you chose the hard way. Okay, but then God speaks words of grace to them. He says, you chose the hard way, but I'm going to rescue you. And he says, none of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. And this time, they're wise enough to follow Paul's advice, to listen to God. And finally, 2 weeks into the storm, they've been in the wind and the waves for 2 weeks. They sense that there's land coming close. And they see the beach, and they run the ship towards this beach. Unfortunately, they get stuck on a sandbar a ways away from the beach. And stuck on the sandbar, the waves pound the ship until it begins to break apart. It's falling apart under them. And those who could swam ashore to the beach. Everybody else grabbed onto a wooden plank and anything else that would float and rode the waves to the beach. And all 276 of them survived. They end up on the little island of Malta. It's amazing that they all survived. They paid a high price for choosing the hard way, right? They lost all the cargo. They lost the ship. But they were saved by the grace of God. What an adventure story, right? Chapter 27 would make an awesome movie scene, wouldn't it? I mean, who doesn't love a story of terror on the open sea, of storm and shipwreck, and then in the end, everyone survives? What a great story. But Acts 27 is so much more than just an amazing story of a travel adventure. It's a much more significant story. This story gives each of us a picture of the choice that we have in our lives and the consequences that follow. Remember last week we talked about and were reminded that God has a plan and a purpose for each one of us. And that plan will be fulfilled, right? Nothing can stop God when he makes a plan. God has a plan for you. It will be fulfilled in your life. The plan for Paul was to get him to Rome, and he's going to get there. Even a storm won't stop him. God has a plan for your life, a destination for you, and he will get you to where he needs you to be. But he allows each of us to make life choices for ourselves along the way. We can choose to get to where God is bringing us the easy way or the hard way. We can fight against him or we can go along with him. Because God knows what's best for us, and he wants what's best for us. He wants us to go the easy way. And he knows how to avoid the storms in our lives so that we can experience smooth sailing. And he knows how to best get us through those storms when those storms do come. And so we can trust God's wisdom to point us towards blessing and joy and contentment in life. Or, like the centurion and the captain on Paul's ship, we can trust our own wisdom. And we can choose our own way, which ends up being the hard way. And often when we think about this, we say that we wish we could hear God's plan clearly for us, right? If only I had Paul standing next to me, speaking the words of God, like the centurion and the captain did. And then, of course, I would follow God's good advice. Of course, I would choose the easy way if I knew what God's plan and direction for my life was so clearly. Well, you know what? We don't need Paul standing next to us. We don't need to hear Paul's voice because we have something even better. God is speaking his direction. He has spoken his direction and his advice very clearly to each one of us. It is right here in this book, in the Bible, for us to read and hear. Right? This book is the story of God's saving work through Jesus, right? And it is also God's direction manual for living well. God is our creator, right? And like any creator, he knows how we're designed. He knows how we work best. He knows what will bring us joy and contentment, the joy and contentment we were created for. He also knows how to fix what's broken in our lives. And he put all of those instructions in this book for us to read, for us to know, for us to follow, so we would know the easy way. I'll admit sometimes this book is difficult to read. It's not the easiest. But there are places where we can find such clear direction towards living the easy way instead of the hard way. Right? We find that direction. We hear God's voice speaking clearly way back in the book of Exodus through the 10 Commandments. Yet these 10 Commandments are so often misunderstood. We hear them and we think this is a list of things we need to do just to make God happy and to keep him from being angry with us. Or we think this is God trying to steal the joy out of life. It's neither of those things. These are God's instructions for living a life that will bring us peace and joy and contentment and fulfillment. Right? All those you shall nots are really God protecting us from the storms. Right? It's God saying, you shall not sail into that storm because I want you to be safe. So you shall not lie. God knows how one lie multiplies into many lies, and they always catch up to us. If they aren't uncovered publicly, they'll catch up to us in our heart and in our character, and they hurt us. He says, you shall not lie. Don't sail into that storm. It will be dangerous and it will hurt. It's the hard way. You shall not commit adultery. Right? Sex is a wonderful gift from God. And he knows the great joy that it brings to us when it's shared exclusively between a husband and wife. And he also knows the pain that it can cause outside of marriage. He's telling us, don't sail into that storm. Don't choose the hard way. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. In other words, don't take what's your neighbor's and don't want what's your neighbor. Be jealous of your neighbor. God says this because he knows that our discontent and our desire for more possessions will never be satisfied with more stuff and more money. He says, don't sail into that storm. All these are God's grace protecting us, directing us towards the easy way. A verse like Micah 6, verse 8, God gives us his direction by saying, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. What's good? What's the right way? What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Do those three things. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God, because that's the way you were created. That's the easy way. Or Proverbs 3, verses 3 and 4. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. You want favor in the sight of God, favor in the sight of men? You want to be successful? Let your life be controlled by love and faithfulness. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount gives direction on how to find blessing in life. That's the list, right? Blessed are. The path to blessing, the way out of the storm and towards goodness. Be meek. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. And if all this seems too complicated, you want just one place that gives you the direction away from the storms of life? Jesus summarized it all pretty simply in Luke 10:27. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Love God. Love others the best that you can. Those are the relationships that you and I were created for. Those are the relationships where we will find contentment and joy. Pursuing those things, loving God and loving our neighbors as we love ourselves, is the path towards the easy way, not the hard way. But sadly, we are so often like the centurion and like the captain on Paul's ship. We hear the easy way and we choose the hard way. We think we know better than God. And interestingly, it's the same voices that were on the ship that continue to lead us into the storms today. Right? The voice of the centurion, the voice of power that says you take control of your own life. You know what's best to do, so you do what you want. Or it's the voice of the captain, right? The voice of money. You do whatever it takes to be financially secure, because finances, money, is where you will find joy and where you will finally find contentment when you get enough of it. Or it's the voice of the majority, right? The voice of popularity. Listen to what everyone else is doing. Do what they do. Just fit in and trust the world's wisdom and everything will be fine. And it's not hard for us to justify listening to these voices. It's not hard for us to justify following them because they're strong voices. They speak loudly and they promise success and they promise happiness and they promise that they'll bring us contentment. But in the end, they always fail to deliver. They bring us the hard way. They lead us into the storm of discontent. where there is a high, high price to pay. But I'm so grateful that this story tells us and shows us that God never gives up on us. Don't miss his grace in this story. Notice God doesn't abandon them. He doesn't say, you chose the storm, you're on your own, good luck. You're getting what you deserve. And God won't abandon us. Even when we choose the hard way, he follows us into the storm that we choose. And yes, we may hear a brief and feel a brief, I told you so. A reminder, yes, we chose the hard way. This isn't God's choice, this was our choice. But we will always hear his love and his grace. He is always ready to rescue us, and it's never too late. Yes, there are consequences to choosing the hard way, but that cost is never God giving up on us. It's never God refusing to forgive us. It's never God refusing to rescue us. It's never God letting us go and letting us sink. Never. Remember, God will always work out his plan for you. That's not the question. The question he leaves up to us is, will we choose to get there the hard way or the easy way? Reflect on your own life, what you're choosing today, how you're living today, what voices you are listening to today. What will you choose? Will you choose the hard way or will you choose the easy way? What are you choosing? The hard way or the easy way? I want to end just with an invitation from Proverbs 3, verse 5, which invites us to listen to God and choose the easy way. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight.